Welcome to Project Freedom. I'm Brian Kapp. Today I'm joined by Cam Medina, retired Army veteran. Cam, thanks for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
No problem. So, I want to talk a little bit about the military today. Kind of just go over a bunch of things about today's military versus past military. Let's start off with the recruiting part of the military. Like the candidate pool, the overall fitness and health, and then, the standards and basic.
Well, I will tell you, and this is just as a former recruiter myself, recruiting nowadays is hurting. It's not like the recruiting environment when we joined. There's a lot of folks joining. Recruiting was healthy in all of the branches, and so because of the quality of the recruits nowadays, and there are certain branches that do better at recruiting than others. Okay, unfortunately, today's young folks, right, the folks that are supposed to be between, the certain ages, right, that can be recruited. I don't think there is an issue with fitness. You'll see nowadays kids aren't as active as they used to be. Usually, kids are a bit more overweight. And so I think that's the biggest obstacle that recruiters face, being able to recruit kids that, number one, want to join, and then number two, that are qualified. And the biggest qualification there is the state of fitness of that individual at the time of entry.
I remember when you and I were going through, you were running 2 miles every day. Once a week you were doing a 5-mile run, and then occasionally you do a 10-mile run. And from my understanding, they don't do as much of that anymore as when we were. We had to be fit. You had to pass a PT test with a certain score, and that was it. There was no below standard. There was no. So how is today's military as far as with the same standards?
Well, I would say that they aren't the same standards. The military has relaxed a lot of the standards. Obviously, it's by design, because I think that the candidates that they are, receiving at all the basic training installations nationwide, are individuals that are a little bit more brittle than the previous generation. Whereas for there's a reason for that. The generation, I believe that the generation of military members that are in the service now, growing up for the most part had a more sedentary life than what we had. I remember there was you'd come home from school and you'd do your homework real quick just so you can go outside and play, whether it was playing basketball, throwing around a football, playing tag, hide and go seek, whatever it was. It was a more physically active generation. And so because kids nowadays are a lot more sedentary, that isn't conducive to, good bone structure, and that affects, the type of standards that because you don't want to break these kids, going into, trying to put them through basic training, for better or for worse. I think that's the strategy behind all this stuff. Yeah, let's push them through basic training. We don't want to break them. Let's relax the standards a little bit, because physically they might not, and even mentally as well. They might not be the same caliber of recruit than in years past.
Yeah, but when you and I went through basic training, it didn't matter what caliber you were. It didn't matter if they broke you or not, because the whole purpose was training and combat ready. Period. It didn't matter, they didn't care if they hurt your feelings. It was all about training and getting you ready. And to me, would that fall on possibly the current training of our NCOs, or would it be, they've watered down our NCOs as far as when you and I were in? Because when you and I were in, NCOs were respected. There was no talking back to them, nothing. Now, from my understanding, there's no respect for the NCOs anymore.
So I think it has to do, that has a lot to do with it as well. The reason why standards are weren't relaxed when we were going through was because there was a surplus of people trying to get into the military. If you didn't cut the mustard, we weren't giving you a mulligan. We were sending you back home. If you couldn't get the training done to standard, I have a line 10 miles long of folks that are trying to get into the military. Now, because there isn't that desire to want to serve for whatever reason, we don't have those 10-mile long lines of folks trying to get into the military. So they want to hold on to what they have. They want to give them every single opportunity, to meet whatever standards are in place now. And when it comes to the NCOs, a lot of the NCOs that are the drill sergeants, are also from that era as well. When we came in the military, a lot of the drill sergeants that were training us were holdovers from the Vietnam era. Folks that had, that were grizzled NCOs, that had wisdom. Combat forged in the fire, exactly. And so that created, a stronger recruit once that individual had met all of their requirements and basic training and went off into the force.
I remember Vietnam generation, they were harder than us.
Absolutely.
And our generation were hard soldiers. I mean, we had strict standards. But it seems like they just keep watering it down over time. And in my opinion, I kind of fear what's going to happen to our military in the future. I mean, the NCOs are being watered down. There's no respect. There's no pretty much respect for the NCOs. I mean, you have a private telling an NCO where to stick it, but then the NCO not being able to do anything because their hands are tied.
I think, and again, this is, I was in the military 20 years, but a blip on the radar, right? I've seen, so as our Army has technologically evolved, there's been a technological evolution. There's been a negative effect. Personnel-wise, there's been a de-evolution of the quality of the service member, and as far as the standards that we know we need to meet. And when we talk NCOs, I think a lot of it has to do. We were in 2 wars at the same time for an extended period of time. That's not an excuse, or a mulligan, to our, to the NCO Corps or to, the general lower enlisted force. But during that time, you didn't have the time, to sit down and work on, the finer details of soldiering. You were deploying, you were moving out, you were coming back, you were getting a little bit of free time, and then you were back on red cycle, ready to deploy again. When we came up, I remember we still had the BDUs.
Yeah.
You still had to shine boots. Little things such as shining boots, doing morning in-ranks inspections, making sure that every single button on your BDU uniform was buttoned, making sure that you didn't have any shoestring threads hanging off of your uniform, making sure that your room was inspection ready all the time. Those small things, right, it enabled, our soldiers, to be sharp, to have the attention to detail, the discipline, to be regimented in the things that they needed to do in order to execute when they were called. Okay, and this is pre 9/11. Okay, and as 9/11, as the wars down in the Middle East took off, we got away from a lot. We got away from a lot of that.
Well, we also changed the uniform, so it made it a lot easier that they didn't.
Yep.
But also the other thing is, we used to have training all year just so you would get ready, just to get your EIB.
I remember.
Now, there's not that readiness for, even the EIB course.
So, funny that you should mention that. I was in a support unit. I was not combat. I was in a signal support unit, and we supported infantry units during those EIB, what they called Super Bowls, right?
Oh,
because the bottom line was, hey, you were trying to earn, your expert infantry badge that was so revered.
Yeah.
Yes, it was prestigious, a prestigious thing to earn. And so, because because of the wars, and I always go back to this, is because that had a great impact on the Army, obviously our country and everything, but specifically down to its lowest level, you could have had a basic infantry guy, private, go downrange, do his job, be involved in a firefight and earn a combat infantry badge.
Yep.
And so then the EIB became sort of took second place to that. And so I think we're moving back into the days of not quite pre 9/11 military, but somewhat of a pre 9/11 military, where now you're going to see very few people earning combat infantry badges. And I think, the EIB, something like the EIB, such a prestigious badge to have, I think that's coming back.
Well, the other units all have the combat action badge. So do you think they're actually going to do kind of like how infantry, we have the EIB. Everybody wants the EIB when it was out. Do you think they're going to offer something for them as far as, because every other branch or every other MOS got the combat action badge. You had to be infantry or combat unit to get the CIB. So I'm wondering if the military might do something for other MOSs.
No, I think the combat action badge, I think there won't be a peacetime iteration to that combat action badge.
So it's just a combat trophy.
It's just that's basically what I think it's going to be. But I think that for those, infantry units, to maintain the proficiency, right, to stay, even the ones that that deployed, that they are still going to want to train every single year and train their junior guys that have not had the experience downrange. That's how you train, those privates. They're not going to have the experiences, of combat in theater. And so the only way that we can maintain and kind of replicate the things that they're going to experience in the event that they do in the future get to experience combat is through the training and through pushing them to earn the EIB.
Yeah, I remember training for the EIB and then going through the course. That was, I want to say, almost as bad, if not worse, than basic. Just for the EIB.
Correct.
I mean, as infantry, it's definitely no joke going for the EIB. I know as we were transitioning out, we had options and we had things we could do so we can prepare to transition to civilian life. Do you see, with today's generation coming out, do you see that same thing, or are they having more of an issue than we were? Because I can honestly tell you, it's very overwhelming when you transition. Even with our generation, even with the help, it's still tough.
So I retired in 2017. Okay, after 20 years, and once you're a few years out, you're going to retire and you start prepping. And I considered myself someone who really prepared well. I reached out to, former mentors of mine that have gone through the transition process, individuals who are also currently going through the transition and comparing notes. But even all of that preparation, does not get you ready for when you exit the military and that you're aware of all these magnificent and awesome benefits that you've earned, how to get them started, where to go, how they actually work. You kind of have an idea when you're doing the transition, right? But, once you have exited, a lot of that stuff, you absolutely need to know every nut and bolt, how everything works. And so I'm a veteran student success coordinator at a local college. And so I've seen not just older vets like myself, who after 20 years have transitioned into civilian life, but the younger generation that only spent a few years in the military. If you think a 20-year vet is lost, as far as their benefits and how to get everything going, just imagine someone who only did 4 years, who probably didn't have a large network of folks, that they could call, that they can reach out to on a moment's notice, how lost that individual is. And luckily, I've learned enough to be able to help, especially those lower enlisted that really don't have a clue.
Yeah, I know if I ever needed help, I could still call any of the guys I serve with, even if it's been 10, 15 years, haven't talked to them. I could call them, hey, I need help, and they'll immediately drop everything, come running. I've noticed, today's generation isn't as, I guess, close or as tight as our generation was in the military. Because I know with us, like I said, you call, no matter how long it's been, hey, I need help, come running. So I'm wondering if, their support network is as tight as ours.
That's tough to say, but let's say for argument's sake, it is. A lot of that also has to do with, it's generational. I think our generation, we were more, we didn't have social media. We had more face-to-face interaction. We didn't have a whole lot of video games. A lot of folks, I knew soldiers, before I retired, lower enlisted soldiers, that outside of work, they really didn't participate in social groups. They would get off work, and start playing video games. And, if they communicated with anyone, it was, on their on the video game machine or on their phone or text or whatever. I think it's a generational thing. But our generation vets, right? The folks, and even the ones prior to us, we have to understand that. We have to be able to reach out and identify those young vets that may have these shortcomings of communication and of building networks, and kind of put our arms around them and let them know, hey man, I know it's tough. You know, I know it can be confusing. Dude, you're not alone. You know, we're here to help you out. And if you need anything, here's my number. Here's my email. Reach out to me. And I think we're doing a really good job. You know, the veterans that you know that are from our generations and before that, to wrap our arms around the newer vets that some for whatever reason may not have built large networks like you and I have. We can pick up the phone and, you know, they'll come running. You know, but there is some of that. I've seen that in the vets.
Okay. Since you work for a veteran center at our local college, what programs or what things is there that veterans can get into to help them as far as with going to college, with, you know, just the support for mental health or things like that?
So our veterans department, we've deliberately gone out to the community and reached out to organizations that are military and veteran friendly organizations, for the most part all nonprofits, just to know who's out there. Because if I run into a veteran who may not have, right, a need when it comes to, you know, their education, because I'm there to help them with that. But say it comes out and says, hey, look, you know, I'm down on my luck. You know, my car's broke down. I saw this as a veteran center and I just came in here to see if there was someone that can help me with this. You know, in the military, in the Army, we had Army Emergency Relief.
Yeah.
When you leave the military, you don't have that, you know? And so, or at least a lot of veterans don't know that there are folks out there that are willing to help, you know? And so we serve as a bridge, okay, to connect veterans, not just with their educational benefits, right? But with, you know, with any other need that they may have, to include, you know, a lot of veterans leave the military and never submit a disability claim. You know, when they do have issues that, you know, that they acquired, you know, through their military service. And so, you know, we tend to connect them with folks that are going to help them, and they're not going to, you know, hoodwink them for money. There's a lot of organizations out there that will tell you, hey, we'll help you with a disability claim, you know, but, you know, you owe us your first paycheck. You don't owe us anything up front. You'll just owe us your first paycheck. And, you know, there have been cases where, you know, a service member's or a veteran's first paycheck is back pay for like a year, you know, $10,000, $14,000, $12,000. And,
yeah, because
you
it's
know,
retro.
Yeah. And these organizations, these for-profit organizations, get to keep that money. So we try to look out for all of our veterans. You know, we like to do grassroots, you know, outreach with all these organizations and kind of put everything all under one roof, so we can, if we can't serve the veteran organically, like from within the college, we know folks out in the community that can, and we'll do a quick intake, interview them, kind of identify what those needs are, and then refer them out.
Okay, so you pretty much vet them for the veterans, so this way we all know when it comes time they're good to go because they were already vetted through you guys.
Correct.
Cam, thank you for everything you do. Really appreciate it, and thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening, and please join us again.